We've all been there, haven't we? Lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling as the hours slip away, the weight of the world pressing down on your chest. Sleep, the simplest of human needs, feels impossibly out of reach. But what if I told you that the path to better sleep doesn't start with another app, a new mattress, or a quick fix? What if it begins with understanding something deeper, something within yourself? God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from Himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing. There is no such thing. That's a bold statement, isn't it? But it holds a truth we rarely consider. The rest we're craving isn't just physical. It's emotional, mental, and even spiritual. And when we ignore that, the endless tossing and turning becomes inevitable. And when we ignore that, the endless tossing and turning becomes inevitable. Think about it. How often does your mind replay conversations, regrets, or anxieties when your head hits the pillow? Those restless nights aren't just about external distractions. They're about inner turmoil. In a world that's noisier and more restless than ever, we've forgotten how to quiet our souls. But Lewis understood this human struggle deeply. He knew that peace, real peace, isn't something you stumble upon. It's something you cultivate. Now, picture this. It's 1940. The world is at war. Cities are in ruins, and fear is everywhere. And yet, during these dark times, C.S. Lewis delivers a series of radio talks that cut through the chaos like a beam of light. He speaks about faith, about the human condition, and about the things that truly matter. His words are not just profound, they're practical. They remind us that even in the most uncertain times, peace is possible. But here's the thing, peace isn't just about avoiding the noise of the world. It's about addressing the noise within. And if we can learn to quiet that inner noise, we might just find the rest we've been searching for. Imagine waking up after a full night's sleep, not just feeling rested, but genuinely refreshed, as if your mind and heart had been gently reset overnight. In this video, we're going to explore how C.S. Lewis's wisdom can help us get there. His insights into anxiety, fear, and hope aren't just abstract ideas. They're tools, powerful ones, that can guide us toward the kind of peace that leads to truly restful sleep. And as we unpack his timeless guidance, you might just find yourself seeing your sleepless nights in a whole new light. So, are you ready? Ready to take a step beyond surface-level solutions and dive into something deeper? Let's begin. But let's pause for a moment. Why is sleep so elusive? Why do so many of us find ourselves caught in an endless cycle of exhaustion, no matter how hard we try to rest? To understand this, let's step into a scene that may feel painfully familiar. Hunger. The physical sensation we experience when we are starved. But sleep can be the worst. Sleep can add to our hunger. It's late, the house is quiet, but your mind is not. You're replaying that awkward comment you made during the meeting earlier, worrying about tomorrow's deadlines, or wondering if you've done enough for the people who rely on you. And just as you start to drift off, another thought jolts you awake. You glance at the clock. It's 2 a.m. Sound familiar? This relentless overthinking, this inability to let go of the day's burdens, is something Lewis himself understood deeply. In his book, Mere Christianity, he describes the human mind as a battlefield, constantly torn between fear and hope, between the noise of the world and the whisper of peace. It's not just the events of our lives that keep us awake, it's how we respond to them. Now let's consider a historical moment. During World War II, when London was under constant threat of bombings, civilians spent countless nights in shelters, unable to predict what horrors the next day might bring. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, people still found ways to rest. How? By anchoring themselves in something greater than their fears. Number 1. Lewis, speaking to a war-torn audience, reminded them that true rest doesn't come from the absence of danger, but from the presence of peace. A peace rooted in something unshakable. He encouraged them to reflect on this word, peace. And here's where it gets interesting. Modern psychology backs this up. Studies show that the key to good sleep isn't just about having a dark room or a comfortable bed. It's about how we process our emotions and thoughts. Sleep experts talk about sleep hygiene, but what they're really describing is mental and emotional hygiene. The ability to put the day to rest so that you can truly rest. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how children sleep? They close their eyes and drift off, as if the world can wait until tomorrow. There's a trust, an innocence, a freedom in the way they rest. Somewhere along the way we lose that. We start carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, forgetting that rest is as much about letting go as it is about lying down. Relying on God has to begin all over again every day, as if nothing had yet been done. This idea might sound challenging, but it's also liberating. It reminds us that each night is a chance to reset, to let go of the struggles of today and prepare for the possibilities of tomorrow. Take the story of a man named George Muller, a 19th century philanthropist who cared for thousands of orphans. Muller faced financial challenges every single day, not knowing if there would be enough food to feed the children. Yet he slept soundly. Why? Because he placed his trust in something greater than himself. His circumstances didn't change overnight, but his perspective did, and that made all the difference. Let's bring it back to today. Imagine a young woman named Sarah. She's a teacher, a mother, and a caretaker for her aging parents. Her days are packed, her nights restless. She tries meditation apps, cutting out caffeine, even switching to a new pillow. But nothing works. One evening, out of sheer desperation, she picks up a copy of the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. In it she reads about the subtle ways anxiety creeps into our lives and the importance of focusing on the eternal rather than the temporary. For the first time in months, Sarah feels a spark of hope. She realizes that her sleepless nights aren't just about stress. They're about what she's allowing to take up space in her mind and heart. Slender, here's the truth. We all have our own version of Sarah's story. We all have moments when the weight of life feels unbearable, when the quiet of the night amplifies our fears and doubts. But what if we approached sleep differently? What if, instead of fighting our thoughts, we reframed them? Instead of wrestling with our anxieties, we laid them down. Lewis believed that the act of surrender, of acknowledging our limitations and placing our trust in something greater, wasn't a sign of weakness but of strength. And that's the invitation he offers us: to stop striving, to stop carrying burdens we were never meant to carry, and to find rest, not just for our bodies, but for our souls. As you think about this, consider one final image. Picture a ship battered by a storm, its sails torn, its crew exhausted. But then in the distance, the crew spots a lighthouse. That lighthouse doesn't calm the storm. It doesn't make the waves disappear, but it gives the crew a sense of direction, a glimmer of hope, a reason to keep going. In the same way, Lewis's wisdom acts as a lighthouse for us, guiding us through the storms of our restless minds toward the shores of peace. In the next part of this journey, we'll dive deeper into the practical ways Lewis's teachings can help us quiet our inner storms. But for now, remember this. Rest is not something you achieve. It's something you receive. And with the right guidance, it's closer than you think. But here's the question that lingers. How do we move from knowing we need rest to actually experiencing it? If rest is something we receive, as Lewis suggests, why does it sometimes feel so out of reach? The answer, as with most meaningful things, lies in layers. Layers of struggle, resistance, and eventually, transformation. Let's start with a mystery. Why do we resist rest? It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Our bodies crave it, our minds beg for it, and yet, when it's finally time to close our eyes, we resist. Could it be that our inability to rest stems from something deeper than just external distractions? Take the story of Florence Nightingale, the famed lady with the lamp. During the Crimean War, she worked tirelessly to care for wounded soldiers, often to the detriment of her own health. Her journals reveal a constant battle between her sense of duty and her need for rest. She once wrote, "I attribute my success to this. I never gave or took an excuse." Admirable, yes, but it's also a cautionary tale. Nightingale eventually suffered from chronic illness, and historians believe her refusal to rest played a role. Historians speculate fantastically about her visits, but can mean nothing less than. This is a conflict many of us can relate to. We live in a world that glorifies busyness, where rest is often seen as laziness. The pressure to keep going becomes so ingrained that even when we're exhausted, we feel guilty for slowing down. But here's where Lewis offers a new perspective. In The Problem of Pain, he writes, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains." It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Sometimes, our inability to rest is the very signal that we need to listen to. Let me introduce you to a man named David, a successful entrepreneur who spent years building his dream business. On the outside, he had it all: wealth, recognition, influence. But inside, he was unraveling. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford, and the stress of constant decision-making began to take a toll on his health. One night, while flipping through channels, he stumbled upon a documentary about C.S. Lewis. Something Lewis said struck him deeply. "Look for yourself, and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ, and you will find him, and with him everything else thrown in." David realized he had been striving for fulfillment in all the wrong places. That moment marked the beginning of his journey toward balance, rest, and a deeper sense of purpose. But here's where the mystery deepens. Why is it that even when we recognize our need for rest, we often fail to take the steps to achieve it? This brings us to the idea of inner conflict, a battle that Lewis described as central to the human experience. In the Screwtape Letters, he paints a vivid picture of this struggle. The senior demon Screwtape advises his apprentice Wormwood to keep humans preoccupied with trivial distractions, ensuring they never confront the deeper questions of life. And isn't that exactly what happens to us? We distract ourselves with scrolling, binge-watching, or endlessly replaying the day's events in our minds. These habits don't just rob us of sleep. They rob us of peace. They keep us stuck in a cycle of avoidance, preventing us from addressing the real sources of our restlessness. Now, let's step into a moment in history that demonstrates the power of confronting inner conflict. During the American Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King Jr. faced immense pressure and danger. There were nights he couldn't sleep, plagued by fear for his family and the people he was leading. But instead of letting that fear consume him, he turned to prayer, reflection, and his unwavering belief in the justice of his cause. Justice means taking the law into your own hands. It means taking the law into your own hands. In doing so, he found the strength to keep going, even when the weight of the world seemed unbearable. This brings us to a crucial realization. Rest isn't the absence of struggle, it's the ability to find peace in the midst of it. And this is where Lewis's wisdom becomes so transformative. He doesn't promise an easy path. Instead, he invites us to embrace the tension between our struggles and our need for rest, trusting that peace is possible even in the hardest moments. Let's take another relatable example. Imagine a college student named Rachel. She's in her final semester, juggling exams, a part-time job, and a social life. Her nights are restless, filled with worries about grades, career prospects, and the future. One day, her professor assigns a reading from C.S. Lewis's Surprised by Joy. In it, Rachel reads about Lewis's search for meaning and the unexpected moments of joy that led him to faith. It's a revelation for her. She realizes that she's been so focused on achieving that she's forgotten how to simply be. Inspired, she starts setting aside time each night to reflect, pray, and release her anxieties. Slowly but surely, her sleep improves, and so does her sense of well-being. But here's the twist. Lewis doesn't just offer a guide to better sleep. He offers a guide to a better life. He challenges us to confront the illusions that keep us restless. The illusion of control, the illusion of self-sufficiency, and the illusion that our worth is tied to our productivity. By dismantling these illusions, we make space for something far more powerful: trust, surrender, and a peace that surpasses understanding. And yet, this journey is not without its challenges. As we begin to quiet our inner noise, we often uncover deeper fears and doubts we've been avoiding. This is the layered conflict Lewis speaks of, the tension between who we are and who we're becoming. But it's also where transformation begins. Think of it like this. When you plant a seed, the soil has to be broken for the roots to grow. In the same way, our restlessness can be the very thing that breaks us open, allowing us to grow into a deeper sense of peace. It's not an easy process, but it's a worthwhile one. As we move forward, we'll uncover more of Lewis's practical wisdom for navigating this journey. But for now, let this thought linger. Rest isn't something you fight for. It's something you make room for. And as you do, you might just find that the peace you've been searching for has been within reach all along. As we move deeper into this journey, let's take a moment to confront one of the most challenging aspects of rest: the struggle to trust that it's possible. After all, how can we let go of our worries when the world seems so unpredictable, so chaotic? This question isn't new. It's one that people throughout history have wrestled with, often under circumstances far more dire than our own. And yet, within this tension lies the possibility of profound transformation. To illustrate this, let's turn to an extraordinary moment in history: the life of Corrie ten Boom. Corrie and her family were Dutch Christians who helped hide Jews during the Holocaust. When their actions were discovered, they were sent to concentration camps. Amid unimaginable suffering, Corrie noticed something remarkable about her sister Betsy. Betsy, though frail and weak, exuded an unshakable peace. She often quoted scripture saying, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." Betsy's trust in something greater than their circumstances gave her a calm that defied logic. The one truth she accepted, the one thing she refused to believe, was that Jesus loved her. Corrie, on the other hand, struggled. She wrestled with anger, fear, and doubt. But as the days turned into weeks, She began to realize that her sister's peace came not from ignoring the horrors around them, but from surrendering them. This surrender wasn't passive. It was an active choice to place their burdens into hands stronger than their own. When the pain became too great, Corey and sisters surrendered their weapons, plunged into hands stronger than their own. This story offers a powerful lesson. Rest doesn't mean escaping reality. It means trusting that, even in the midst of chaos, there's a foundation strong enough to hold us. C.S. Lewis echoed this idea in The Weight of Glory when he wrote, "We are far too easily pleased." He argued that we settle for distractions and temporary comforts when we're meant for something much greater, a joy and peace that can't be shaken. Now let's bring this idea closer to home. Imagine a man named Chris. He's a father of 3, working long hours to provide for his family. Every night he stays up late, scrolling through financial reports and worrying about how to make ends meet. His wife suggests he take a break, but Chris refuses. "If I don't keep working," he says, "everything will fall apart." One evening, out of sheer exhaustion, Chris picks up a book that's been sitting on his shelf for years, Mere Christianity. He's struck by Lewis's words. Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods. Chris realizes he's been trying to control everything himself, forgetting that true rest requires trust, not in his own abilities, but in something bigger than his fears. This brings us to the heart of the transformation arc. Rest isn't just about sleep or relaxation. It's about a shift in perspective. It's about recognizing that we're not meant to carry every burden alone. And while this may sound simple, it's anything but easy. C.S. Lewis may remain a type. Take, for example, the story of Harriet Tubman. Known as the Moses of her people, Tubman led dozens of enslaved individuals to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Her journey was fraught with danger, and there were countless nights when sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet those who knew her described her as someone who radiated peace and strength. Tubman attributed this to her unwavering faith, often pausing to pray for guidance in the most perilous moments. Second, every individual knows the truth. The strength. She didn't rest because her circumstances were easy. She rested because she trusted in a power greater than her fears. At the low line. But what does this look like in our everyday lives? Let's consider a practical example. A young woman named Emma struggles with insomnia. She tries everything: white noise machines, herbal teas, even sleep medications. But nothing works. One night, in frustration, she decides to write down everything that's troubling her. As she fills the pages of her journal, she begins to notice a pattern. Most of her worries are about things she can't control, inspired by a quote she once read from Lewis. "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." Emma decides to create a new bedtime ritual. Instead of lying awake and ruminating, she spends a few minutes each night writing down what she's grateful for. She also begins a habit of quiet reflection, surrendering her worries in prayer. It doesn't happen overnight, but over time, Emma starts to notice a change. Her sleep improves, but more importantly, so does her overall sense of peace. What Emma discovered, and what Lewis so often emphasized, is that rest is as much about preparation as it is about letting go. It's about creating rhythms and practices that remind us of what's truly important. And it's about choosing, moment by moment, to trust in the promise of peace, even when it feels elusive. When constantly seeking more, when the impulse to be more is present with us. Let's return to the metaphor of the lighthouse from part 2. Imagine now that the storm has intensified. The waves are higher, the wind fiercer, but the lighthouse remains steady, its beam cutting through the darkness. The crew aboard the ship knows they may still face challenges before they reach safety, but the sight of the lighthouse gives them hope. In the same way, Lewis's teachings act as a beacon, guiding us through the storms of our restless minds toward a place of calm and clarity. This is the mystery box Lewis invites us to open, the idea that peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of something greater than the struggle. It's a paradox, much like sleep itself. The harder you try to force it, the more it eludes you. But when you create space for it, when you prepare the soil, it begins to grow. And this is where the layered conflict truly unfolds. We live in a culture that tells us to hustle harder, to achieve more, to never stop. But deep down, we know this isn't sustainable. The real battle is between the demands of the world and the quiet voice within us that longs for rest. It's a battle Lewis understood intimately, and one he encourages us to confront with courage and honesty. As we prepare to move into the final part of this journey, let me leave you with one last image. Picture a garden at night. The soil is dark and quiet, the seeds buried deep. To the untrained eye, it looks like nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, there's growth. There's life. In the same way, the moments of rest we create, no matter how small, are where transformation begins. And so the question remains, are you ready to trust the process? Are you ready to surrender the chaos and make room for the peace that's been waiting for you all along? Montague Collins. In the final chapter, we'll explore what this transformation looks like in full bloom. How Lewis's teachings can guide us toward a life of true rest, joy, and renewal. But for now, hold on to this thought. The seeds of rest are already within you. All you have to do is nurture them. And now, we arrive at the culmination of this journey, the point where transformation takes root and begins to flourish. If you've stayed with us this far, perhaps you've already sensed the shift within you. Maybe it's a quiet realization, or maybe it's a deep longing to finally release the burdens you've been carrying. Whatever it is, know this: you're not alone. C.S. Lewis believed that true rest begins with trust, a trust that goes beyond ourselves and reaches towards something eternal. He wrote, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." This isn't just about sleep. It's about stepping into a life marked by peace, purpose, and joy. Imagine this. You've just had a restful night's sleep, the kind that leaves you feeling lighter, as if the weight of the world has been lifted from your shoulders. The morning sunlight streams through your window, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you wake up with a sense of clarity and hope. That's the life Lewis envisioned. Not a life without struggles, but a life where those struggles no longer define us. Let's return to our lighthouse one final time. Its light has guided us through the storm, but now the waters are calm. The ship is nearing the shore, and the crew is finally at rest, knowing they've made it home. This is the peace Lewis spoke of. A peace that anchors us, even when the waves rise again. The peace that says, let's be joyful. But here's the truth. This transformation doesn't happen by accident. It requires intentionality. It means carving out space for rest, reflecting on what truly matters, and releasing the need to control every outcome. And it means choosing, again and again, to trust in the promise of peace. Take one final example. A man named Michael, a middle-aged teacher who spent decades pouring his energy into his students, but neglected his own well-being. After reading Lewis's The Great Divorce, Michael was struck by the idea that heaven and peace begins with the choices we make here and now. He started small, setting aside time each evening to read, pray, and journal. Over time, those small habits grew into a deep sense of calm that transformed not just his sleep, but his entire outlook on life. First life, then work, then family. You see, Lewis didn't just offer wisdom, he offered hope. He reminded us that no matter how restless we feel, no matter how overwhelming life becomes, peace is always within reach. It's not reserved for the perfect or the pious. It's for the broken, the weary, the ones who feel like they've tried everything and still come up empty. And now, it's your turn. If this journey has spoken to you, if you've felt even the smallest flicker of hope, don't let it stop here. Begin today, right now, by choosing to make room for rest. Write down what's weighing on your heart, take a moment to reflect, or simply pause and breathe. These small steps matter more than you think. And if you know someone who's struggling with restlessness, share this video with them. You never know whose life might be changed by these words. Together, we can spread the light that C.S. Lewis left behind, a light that continues to guide us through the storms of life. C.S. Lewis, love. Before you go, I want to invite you to be part of this growing community. By subscribing to this channel, you're not just clicking a button, you're joining a movement that believes in clarity over confusion, peace over chaos, and hope over despair. Hit subscribe and share this video with someone you care about. Let's walk this path together and bring Lewis's timeless wisdom to more hearts in need. Because the world is restless, but you don't have to be. Peace is waiting. It always has been. And now, it's your time to embrace it. Stay with your heart and pray for the peace within your heart.